I'm Carla, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the afterthought in my family. It wasn't always obvious, but looking back, the signs were there from the start. My younger sister Sarah burst into the world like a supernova, all golden curls and dimpled smiles. From day one, she had our parents wrapped around her little finger. Me? I was the quiet one, more interested in my chemistry set than in making friends. I still remember my 10th birthday. I'd been hoping for a new microscope, dropping hints for weeks. Instead, I got a frilly dress that made me look like a cupcake. But Mom, I hate dresses, I protested. Nonsense, you'll look just like Sarah, she beamed, completely missing the point. As we grew older, the divide only widened. Sarah breezed through school on charm and good looks, while I buried myself in books and science experiments. Did you hear? Sarah's been nominated for prom queen. Mom gushed over dinner one night. That's great, I mumbled, trying to muster some enthusiasm. I won first place in the science fair today. Oh, that's nice, dear, Dad said absently, already turning back to Sarah. So, Princess, have you picked out your dress yet? And so it went, year after year. My achievements, no matter how significant, were always overshadowed by Sarah's latest triumph, no matter how trivial. The state science fair in my senior year was my moment to shine. I'd spent months perfecting my project on sustainable biofuels. When they announced the winners, I could hardly believe my ears. First place goes to Carla Johnson. I was ecstatic. Finally, something even my parents couldn't ignore. Or so I thought. That's great, honey, Mom said distractedly when I told her the news. But we can't make it to the awards ceremony. Sarah has a dance recital that day, and you know how important that is to her. I watched them fuss over Sarah's costume and makeup, my trophy gathering dust on a shelf. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but one I was getting used to. When the acceptance letters started rolling in, I could barely contain my excitement. Full scholarship to a prestigious university? It was more than I'd dared to hope for. Mom, Dad, I got in. I burst into the living room, waving the letter. Full ride and everything. Mom glanced up from her magazine. That's nice, dear. Sarah, didn't you say you needed help picking out a prom dress? Just like that, my big moment was brushed aside. Again. But, it's a full scholarship, I tried again, my voice smaller this time. Dad patted my shoulder absently. Good job, kiddo. Sarah, Princess, let's go shopping. Can't have you showing up to prom in just anything, can we? I watched them pile into the car, my acceptance letter crumpled in my fist. It was a familiar feeling, but it still stung. Despite the lack of fanfare from my family, I packed my bags and headed off to college with high hopes. For the first time, I was free from Sarah's shadow, free to be just Carla. College was a revelation. Suddenly, my passion for science wasn't weird or nerdy, it was respected, even admired. I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor, determined to make the most of this opportunity. Meanwhile, Sarah followed the path our parents had always dreamed of. She enrolled in the local community college, more interested in parties than classes. College is so hard, she whined during one of our rare phone calls. I don't know how you do it, Carla. I bit back the urge to point out that maybe if she spent less time partying and more time studying, she might find it easier. Instead, I just mumbled some vague encouragement and changed the subject. It was during my sophomore year that Sarah dropped her bombshell. I'm engaged, she squealed over the phone. Mike proposed last night. Isn't it romantic? Mike. Her high school sweetheart. The guy who'd once asked me if science was like, really hard and stuff. That's great, Sarah, I managed, trying to inject some enthusiasm into my voice. Have you set a date? We're thinking right after graduation, she gushed. Oh, Carla, it's going to be perfect. You'll be my maid of honor, won't you? The wedding was exactly as you'd expect. Sarah was radiant, Mike looked uncomfortable in his tux, and I stood there in my frilly pink nightmare, pasting on a smile for the photos. Isn't this perfect? Mom whispered to me during the reception. This is what every mother dreams of for her daughter. I wanted to ask if she'd ever dreamed anything for me, but I held my tongue. It was Sarah's day, after all. As I threw myself into my studies and later my career, Sarah's life seemed to follow a script straight out of our parents' dreams. Within a year of her wedding, she announced her first pregnancy. "I'm going to be a grandmother." Mom squealed over the phone. "Oh, Carla, isn't it wonderful?" I murmured my congratulations, trying to ignore the implicit question in her voice. "When are you going to settle down, Carla? When will you give us grandchildren?" Emma arrived 9 months later, a bundle of pink blankets and loud cries. I flew home for the weekend, dutifully cooing over my new niece and enduring the not-so-subtle hints from my parents. "You know, Carla," Dad said, bouncing Emma on his knee, "you're not getting any younger. Don't you want this for yourself?" I gritted my teeth. "I'm focused on my career right now, Dad." Mom clucked her tongue. "Career is all well and good, dear, but family is what really matters." I bit back a retort about how they'd never seemed to care much about my career before. Instead, I plastered on a smile and changed the subject. 2 years later, Liam joined the family. Once again, I played the role of the doting aunt, all while fielding questions about my own lack of family. Meanwhile, I was making strides in my career as a biotechnologist. Long hours and hard work paid off, and by 30, I was a senior researcher. My parents' response to this news? A distracted "that's nice, dear," as they cooed over new pictures of Emma and Liam. It was around this time that I decided to buy a house. I'd saved carefully, living frugally while my colleagues splurged on expensive cars and vacations. When I finally found the perfect place, a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a great neighborhood, I was over the moon. "Mom, Dad, I bought a house," I announced during our next phone call. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "A house?" Mom repeated. "All by yourself?" "Yes, all by myself," I said, my excitement deflating a little. "It's a great investment, and—" "But it's such a big house for one person," Mom interrupted. "What will you do with all that space?" I sighed. "I'll enjoy it, Mom. It's mine." "Well," she said, her tone making it clear she didn't approve, "I suppose if that's what you want." "Oh, did I tell you? Emma lost her first tooth yesterday." And just like that, we were back to talking about Sarah and her kids. The months following my house purchase were a whirlwind of work and settling into my new home. I threw myself into decorating, turning each room into a reflection of my personality. It was during this time that I started to feel a shift in my family dynamics. The usual calls from my parents became less frequent, and when they did call, there was an odd tension in their voices. One evening, I received a call from my mother. "Carla, dear," she said, her voice sickly sweet, "we're having a family dinner next week. You'll be there, won't you? We need to talk." I agreed, my suspicions raised. In my family, "we need to talk" usually meant trouble was brewing. The night of the dinner arrived, and I pulled up to my parents' house with a sense of foreboding. Sarah's car was already in the driveway, and I could hear the excited shrieks of Emma and Liam from inside. Dinner was a tense affair. My parents kept exchanging glances, and Sarah seemed unusually quiet. Mike, Sarah's husband, kept clearing his throat as if he wanted to say something, but thought better of it. Finally, as we were finishing dessert, my father cleared his throat. "Carla, we need to talk about something important." Here it comes, I thought. "What's up, Dad?" He glanced at my mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Well, you see, sweetie, we'd been thinking. That big house of yours, it's really too much for just one person." I felt my hackles rise. "Dad, we'd been over this. I like my house. It's mine." "Yes, but—" He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. My mother jumped in. "What your father is trying to say is that Sarah and her family need more space. The kids are growing, and their apartment is getting cramped." I looked at Sarah, who was suddenly very interested in her plate. Okay, and? And we think, my mother continued, her voice sickly sweet, that since you're single and have no children, you should give your house to Sarah and her family. Just give them the keys and move out. For a moment, I was speechless. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to yell, "Gotcha," and reveal it was all a joke. But all I saw were expectant faces. You can't be serious, I finally managed. Now, Carla, my mother said, her tone patronizing. Don't be selfish. Sarah needs her own space more than you do. Selfish? I repeated, my voice rising. How is it selfish to want to keep the house I worked hard for and paid for myself? It's your sisterly duty to help in times of need, my father chimed in. I turned to Sarah, who was still avoiding my gaze. And what do you have to say about this? She shrugged, finally meeting my eyes. Well, it would be nice to have more space for the kids. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own family, asking me to give up my home, acting like I was the unreasonable one for refusing. No, I said firmly, standing up. Absolutely not. I'm not giving up my house. As I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, I heard my father call out. Think about it, Carla. Family should come first. The days following that disastrous family dinner were a blur of disbelief and anger. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, unable to believe my family's audacity. How could they even think to ask such a thing? My phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls from my parents and Sarah, but I ignored them all. On the third day, as I was trying to focus on work, my phone lit up with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Figuring it wasn't family, I answered. Hello, is this Carla? A woman's voice came through, sounding disapproving. Yes, who's this? This is your Aunt Mildred. I can't believe what I'm hearing about you, young lady. Your poor sister needs a home for her children, and you're living all alone in that big house. Shame on you. I felt my blood pressure rising. Aunt Mildred, that's not... In my day, she continued, not letting me get a word in. Family helped family. We didn't hoard our resources like misers. I'm not hoarding anything, I snapped. It's my house. I bought it with my own money. Well, she huffed, if you're not going to use all that space, you should at least consider donating your eggs. It's not like you're using them anyway. I was so shocked, I nearly dropped the phone. Excuse me? You heard me, she said primly. You're not getting any younger, you know. Tick-tock. I hung up without another word, my hands shaking with anger. How dare she? How dare any of them? But it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I was bombarded with calls and messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Each one had an opinion on what I should do with my house and my life. My great-aunt Edna left a voicemail. Carla dear, it's your great-aunt Edna. I just wanted to say, it's not too late to find a nice man and settle down. Then you'd need that big house. It was relentless. Every ping of my phone brought a new judgment, a new guilt trip. I felt like I was going crazy. I started to dread checking my phone, wincing every time it buzzed. I threw myself into work, staying late at the lab just to avoid going home to more messages. It was during one of these late nights at work that I got sick. Nothing serious, just a bad cold, but enough that my boss insisted I take a few days off to recover. So there I was, curled up on my couch with a box of tissues, feeling miserable both physically and emotionally. My phone had been mercifully quiet for a few hours, and I was just starting to relax when I heard it. A noise at my front door. Like someone was fumbling with the lock. My heart started racing. Was someone trying to break in? I got up as quietly as I could, creeping towards the door. Through the window, I could see figures on my porch. Familiar figures. I yanked the door open, startling the people on the other side. What the hell are you doing? There, caught red-handed, were my parents and Sarah. They looked like deer caught in headlights, frozen in the act of trying to break into my home. My mother was the first to recover. Carla, dear, we were just worried about you. You haven't been answering your phone. So you decided to break into my house? I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. My father at least had the decency to look embarrassed. We didn't think you'd be home. We thought you'd be at work. And that makes it okay? I was practically shouting now. What were you planning to do? Move Sarah in while I was gone? Sarah, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Carla, you're being hysterical. We were just going to wait for you to come home. I noticed for the first time that there was a car parked behind them, loaded with boxes and furniture. My blood ran cold as I realized the full extent of their plan. You were going to move in, I said, my voice flat. You were actually going to move into my house without my permission. Now, Carla, my mother started, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I knew so well. We've discussed this. Sarah needs the space more than you do. We thought if we just took the initiative. You thought wrong, I cut her off. This is my house, mine. I bought it with my own money I earned through hard work. You have no right to it. Just then, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. My neighbors, the Johnsons, were peering out their window, clearly concerned by the commotion. Mr. Johnson caught my eye and held up his phone, mouthing, "Police?" I nodded, grateful for their concern. Turning back to my family, I said, "I've called the police. You need to leave. Now." "You wouldn't," my father scoffed. "Your own family?" As if on cue, the sound of sirens filled the air. My family's faces paled. The police car pulled up, and 2 officers got out. "Is there a problem here?" one of them asked, eyeing the scene warily. I took a deep breath. "Yes, officer. These people were attempting to break into my home." "Carla," my mother gasped. "How could you?" The officers looked at my family. "Is this true?" My father started to stammer out an explanation, but the officer held up a hand. "Sir, attempting to enter a property without the owner's permission is a serious offense. I'm going to have to ask you all to leave immediately." As the officers escorted my family off my property, I stood in the doorway, shaking. I couldn't believe it had come to this. "You'll regret this, Carla," Sarah called over her shoulder as they were leaving. "You'll end up old and alone." I slammed the door shut, sliding down to sit on the floor, my back against it. Tears started to flow freely now, a mix of anger, hurt, and relief. My phone had fallen silent. No more calls from distant relatives, no more guilt-tripping messages. It was as if I'd been excommunicated from the family. Part of me was relieved, but another part ached for the connection, dysfunctional as it had been. It was in this tumultuous state that I received an unexpected message. It was from my Aunt Maggie, my mother's sister. We hadn't spoken in years, not since she'd had a falling out with my mom over some old family drama. "I'll meet you tomorrow at Café Bleu at 1400 hours." Intrigued and desperate for any ally, I agreed to meet her. The next day, I found myself sitting across from Aunt Maggie in a cozy corner of Café Bleu. She looked older than I remembered, but her eyes were sharp and kind. "Carla," she began, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm so sorry for what you've been through. Your mother called me, trying to get me on her side. But there's more to this story than you know. That's why I asked you to meet me." My curiosity piqued, I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Aunt Maggie took a deep breath. "Your parents and Sarah, they're in serious financial trouble. Sarah and Mike have been living beyond their means for years. Luxury cars, designer clothes, lavish vacations, all on credit." I shook my head in disbelief. "But why? How?" "It's worse than that," Aunt Maggie continued. "Mike has a gambling problem. A bad one. He's been secretly draining their accounts for years." The pieces started to fall into place. The desperate attempt to get my house, the constant pressure. "But what about Mom and Dad?" I asked. Aunt Maggie's face grew grim. "They lost a significant amount of money in a pyramid scheme a few years back. They'd been barely keeping their heads above water. They were planning to move in with Sarah and Mike as soon as they got your house. I sat back, stunned. How do you know all this? I work at the bank where they all have accounts, Aunt Maggie explained. I noticed some suspicious activity and started digging. When I confronted your mother about it, she cut me out of the family. My mind was reeling. All this time, while I'd been working hard and saving, my family had been digging themselves into a hole. And they'd tried to drag me down with them. Carla, Aunt Maggie said gently, I know this is a lot to take in. But I think it's time we did something about this situation. If you're willing, I have an idea. Armed with the information Aunt Maggie had shared, we decided to dig deeper. We hired a private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Diana who came highly recommended. For weeks, we waited anxiously as Diana worked her magic. Finally, she called us in for a meeting. What she revealed left us speechless. Mike, Sarah's husband, had been leading a double life. He was involved in an affair with none other than my cousin Jenny, Uncle Bob's daughter. He's been funneling money to her for months, Diana explained, showing U.S. bank statements and hotel receipts. Expensive gifts, weekend getaways, you name it. But where did he get the money? I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. Diana's face grew grim. From his gambling wins, and from your parents. Aunt Maggie and I exchanged shocked glances. The betrayal ran deeper than we'd imagined. We decided to host a family gathering at my house. The irony wasn't lost on me, the very house they had tried to take from me would be the stage for their undoing. The day of the gathering arrived. I watched as my family members trickled in, their faces a mix of curiosity and smugness. They probably thought I was going to cave to their demands. Once everyone was seated, I stood up, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. I've called you all here today because there are some things you need to know, I began. I laid out everything, the financial troubles, the gambling, the affair. With each revelation, I watched the color drain from their faces. Sarah jumped up, tears streaming down her face. It's not true, she screamed, before collapsing into sobs. Mike, tell them it's not true. But Mike was already halfway to the door. Uncle Bob, his face contorted with rage, caught him by the collar. You son of, he growled. That's my daughter you've been fooling around with. My parents sat in stunned silence, the reality of their exposed financial ruin seemingly more devastating than the fact that they had tried to steal my house. The relatives who had judged me so harshly began to stammer out apologies. We had no idea, Aunt Mildred muttered. Carla, we're so sorry. As the chaos unfolded around me, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth was out. The lies and manipulations were exposed. In the weeks that followed, our family was turned upside down. Sarah, unable to forgive Mike's infidelity, filed for divorce. With nowhere else to go, she and the kids moved back in with our parents. But their reprieve was short-lived. The bank foreclosed on their house. They were forced to downsize to a small, rented apartment, all 5 of them crammed into a space smaller than my living room. As for me, I watched it all unfold from a distance. After much soul-searching and several tearful nights, I made the difficult decision to sever all ties with my immediate family. You're doing the right thing, Carla, Aunt Maggie assured me one afternoon over coffee. It's not easy, but it's necessary for your mental health and well-being. Aunt Maggie had become my rock, the family I chose when my blood relatives had let me down. Our weekly coffee dates became a cornerstone of my new life. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself settling into a new routine. Without the constant drama and demands of my family, I had time to focus on myself. But with that came a startling realization: I was lonely. You know, Aunt Maggie said one day, there's a world out there beyond work and home. Why don't you try something new? With her encouragement, I decided to join a local rock climbing group. It was far outside my comfort zone, but as I strapped on the harness for the first time, I felt a thrill of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. That's where I met Alex. He was belaying another climber, his strong hands confidently handling the rope. When he turned and flashed me a warm smile, I felt my heart skip a beat. "First time?" he asked, noticing my nervous fidgeting with the equipment. "Is it that obvious?" I laughed. We struck up a conversation, and I was immediately drawn to his kind eyes and easygoing nature. As we talked, I learned he was a wildlife photographer, with a passion for capturing the beauty of nature. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of excitement about the possibility of a relationship. Alex was kind, adventurous, and understood the complexities of family dynamics in a way few others could. We began dating, our shared love for nature and understanding of complex family dynamics bringing us closer. Before I knew it, we were discussing marriage, a concept that once seemed foreign and unattainable to me. Through it all, Aunt Maggie remained my steadfast support. She became the mother figure I had always yearned for, but never had. "Carla," she said to me one day, her eyes misty. "I want you to know something. I've changed my will. I'm leaving everything to you." As I hugged her, tears streaming down my face, I marveled at how much my life had changed. The path hadn't been easy, but it had led me to where I was meant to be. With Aunt Maggie's love, Alex's support, and my newfound strength, I was ready to embrace whatever the future held.
Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Thompson. I'm 28, and I've been grinding away at Thompson Industries since I could spell spreadsheet. It's a tech company my dad, Richard Thompson, built from scratch. And no, being the boss's daughter isn't exactly smooth sailing, but I've earned my way. Just got promoted to Chief Financial Officer, and it feels dang good. I'm also engaged to an incredible guy, Mark. He's an investment banker, brilliant, patient, and thankfully not bothered by my workaholic tendencies. We make it work. Now, about my sister Emily. She's 25, works in marketing, and, well, it's complicated. She's always been the free spirit, while I was the one nose deep in accounting books. Dad's expectations are sky high for both of us, but Emily struggles with that pressure. "Sarah, can you check this proposal for me?" Emily asked, barging into my office one day. I glanced at my jam-packed schedule. "Sure, Em, give me an hour." She rolled her eyes. "Never mind, I'll figure it out." "Come on, don't be like that. I'm just swamped." "You're always swamped. Golden child and all that." I winced. "That's not fair, Emily. I'm trying to help." "Help? Like getting me this job?" "I didn't need your charity, Sarah." "It wasn't charity. I thought you wanted to work here." She stormed out, leaving me feeling awful. Every time I try to mentor her, she acts like I'm flaunting my success. Then there's Jake, Emily's boyfriend. He's in accounting, entry level. Nice enough guy, but something always felt off. Like the way he looks at me, as if I'm competition. One day, I was heading to the break room for coffee when I overheard them talking in hushed tones. "Are you sure this will work?" Emily whispered. Jake's voice was intense. "Trust me, with my access and your inside info, it's foolproof. Sarah won't know what hit her." I froze. What the hell? But framing her for embezzlement? Isn't that going too far? My blood ran cold. Embezzlement. Frame me? You want to be daddy's favorite or not? Jake scoffed. "Once Sarah's out of the picture, you'll finally get the recognition you deserve." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own sister plotting to destroy everything I've worked for. I wanted to confront them right then and there, but something held me back. I needed to plan. I went back to my office, locked the door, and sank into my chair. My perfect life now felt like it was built on quicksand. Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on Emily and Jake. I started noticing things, like the way they were always huddled over a computer, or how they were suddenly best buddies with it, constantly asking for help. "Sarah, got a sec?" Olivia, my best friend and head of HR, poked her head into my office. "Yeah, come in." "Close the door." She sat down, concern etched on her face. "What's going on?" "You've been acting weird." I took a deep breath. "Liv, I need to tell you something, but it stays between us." I told her everything, what I overheard, my suspicions. Her eyes widened. "Holy Sarah, are you sure?" "I wish I wasn't. But I need your help. Can you keep an eye on their system access quietly?" Olivia nodded. "Consider it done." We'll catch these snakes. Weeks passed, and things got more suspicious. Emily and Jake would freeze up when I walked by, and I caught them repeatedly checking their accounts. Sarah, these numbers in the Key 3 report don't add up, Dad said during our weekly meeting. I struggled to keep my voice steady. I noticed that too. I'm looking into it. His eyes narrowed. See that you do. We can't afford mistakes like this. Late nights became my new normal as I dug deeper into the financials. The more I looked, the worse it got. A web of false transactions all pointing to me. Real clever, I muttered at 2 a.m. staring at the evidence. Then came the family dinner. Dad insisted we talk about the company's future. Emily, of course, volunteered to host. The tension was suffocating. So Sarah, Emily said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. How's the financial department? Any issues? I nearly choked on my wine. Everything's fine. Why do you ask? She shrugged, feigning innocence. Oh, no reason. Just heard some rumors about discrepancies in the books. Pretty big ones. Dad's head snapped up. What discrepancies? I'm sure it's nothing, Emily continued. Right, Sarah? All eyes turned to me. My mind raced. I couldn't reveal everything yet, but I couldn't lie either. We've had some irregularities, I admitted, but I'm handling it. Dad frowned. Why am I just hearing about this? I wanted to have all the facts before bringing it to you, I replied quickly, trying to stay composed. I didn't want to cause unnecessary panic. Panic? My mom asked, her voice laced with concern. Sarah, what's really going on? I could feel Emily's smug gaze burning into me. She thought she had me cornered, but little did she know I was already 3 steps ahead. Look, I said, setting my fork down. There have been some issues with the financial reports. I've been working overtime to trace the source. It's complicated. Complicated, Dad echoed. Sarah, you're the CFO. Making things uncomplicated is your job. I know, Dad, and I promise you, I'll get to the bottom of this. Every penny will be accounted for. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of tense small talk and sharp glances. As we were leaving, Emily grabbed my arm. Everything okay, sis? You seemed a little flustered in there. I met her eyes, my voice low and steady. I'm fine, Emily, and I think you know exactly why. The next morning, I marched into Olivia's office, fueled by determination. Slamming the door shut, I declared, We're taking these bastards down. Olivia glanced up with a knowing smile. I was hoping you'd say that. What's the plan, boss? We spent hours plotting. It was risky, but it was the best way to expose Emily and Jake without bringing down the company. A fake acquisition. Olivia raised an eyebrow. That's bold, even for you. I grinned. Go big or go home, right? We leak info about Thompson Industries acquiring a hot new startup. Emily and Jake won't be able to resist using it for their scheme. Emily, of course, grew curious. She started probing me for details, cornering me at every opportunity. So this acquisition, she said casually one afternoon, must be a big deal, huh? A lot of money involved. I feigned indifference. You know I can't discuss the details, Em. She nodded, a little too understanding. Of course, just curious. As soon as she left, I texted Olivia. They took the bait. Time for phase 2. Finally, the day arrived. I called an emergency board meeting. My heart raced as the executive team filed in. Dad looked concerned. Emily was smug, and Jake, nervous. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady. I've called this meeting to address the financial discrepancies affecting the company. I pulled up the first slide of my presentation. What you're about to see is the result of weeks of investigation. It reveals a systematic attempt to embezzle funds and frame me for the crime. Gasps filled the room. Emily's smirk vanished. Sarah, what is this? Dad demanded. The truth, Dad, just watch. Slide after slide, I laid out the evidence. Doctored reports, falsified transactions, all leading back to 2 people, Emily and Jake. This is ridiculous, Emily sputtered. You're making this up. I turned to her, my voice icy. Am I, Emily? Then how do you explain this? I played the recording of her and Jake discussing their plan in detail. Her face drained of color. Where did you get that? She whispered. You're not as clever as you think, sis. Did you really believe I wouldn't fight back? Jake shot to his feet. This is all a misunderstanding. Emily, tell them. But Emily was crumbling. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at our father. Daddy, I just wanted you to be proud of me, like you are of Sarah. Dad looked shell-shocked. Emily, how could you? It was all her idea. Jake blurted out. She came to me, said we could both benefit if we took Sarah down. I just went along with it. Emily's head snapped up. You lying bastard, it was your plan. As they turned on each other, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. I'd won, but at what cost? That's enough, I said firmly. Security will escort you both out. The authorities have already been notified. As they were led away, Emily shot me a venomous glare. I hate you, she spat. I met her gaze steadily. I know, but I'm not the one you should be angry with. You did this to yourself. The room fell silent as the door closed behind them. I turned to face the stunned executives and my shaken father. I know this is a lot to process, I said, but I promise you, Thompson Industries will recover from this. We're stronger than the actions of two misguided individuals. As the meeting adjourned, Dad approached me, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. Sarah, I don't know what to say. I straightened my shoulders. You don't have to say anything, Dad. Just trust that I've got this under control. It's what you trained me for after all. He nodded and walked away, leaving me alone with the weight of everything that had just unfolded. I allowed myself a moment to breathe. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. We have to fire them immediately, I said, pacing Dad's office. He nodded, his voice heavy. I know, but Sarah, she's still your sister. No, Dad, I said firmly. She stopped being my sister the moment she tried to destroy everything we've built. The next morning, Emily and Jake were escorted out, their belongings packed in boxes. As Emily passed my office, our eyes met for a brief moment. I saw a flicker of the little sister I used to know, but I steeled myself. This wasn't the time for weakness. We're pressing charges, I told our legal team, full extent of the law. No deals. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. Even for your sister. Especially for my sister. Sarah, you need to rest, Mark said one night, finding me hunched over my laptop at 3 a.m. I shook my head. I can't. There's too much at stake. He sat beside me, taking my hand. I know, but you're not alone in this. Let me help. His support meant everything. While my family was falling apart, Mark remained my rock. Then, one rainy afternoon, there was a knock at my office door. It was Emily. Sarah, please, can we talk? She asked, her voice shaky. I stared at her, the stranger wearing my sister's face. There's nothing to say. I'm sorry, she blurted out. I was jealous and stupid, and... Save it for the judge, Emily. We're done here. As security led her away, I felt a pang in my chest, but I squashed it down. She'd made her choice. The trial was a media circus. Jake, facing additional charges, crumbled fast. He took a plea deal, throwing Emily under the bus in the process. Miss Thompson, the prosecutor asked me on the stand, did you have any indication of your sister's intentions? I looked straight at Emily. No, I trusted her completely. That was my mistake. I'm proud of you, kiddo, Dad said, hugging me tightly after the verdict. You saved this company. You saved our family. I hugged him back, feeling the weight of the past year begin to lift. Months later, I stood in front of a mirror, adjusting my wedding veil. Mark and I had decided life was too short to wait. You ready? Olivia asked, grinning. I took a deep breath. More than ever. As I walked down the aisle, I saw my future stretching out before me, Mark, beaming, Dad crying, though he'd deny it later. Our friends and colleagues all gathered to celebrate. At the reception, Dad clinked his glass for a toast. To Sarah and Mark, he began, his voice full of emotion. And to the bright future of Thompson Industries under Sarah's leadership. As the room erupted in applause, I felt a sense of closure, but a question still lingered in my mind. Now I turn that question to you. If you were in my shoes, could you ever forgive Emily for her betrayal, or would you cut ties completely, as I did? There's no easy answer, so I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.
Hey, I'm Alex. It was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of my life. The house was glowing with warm light, and the smell of roasted chicken filled the air. I was setting the table with our best china, rehearsing the speech in my head. The one where I'd tell my parents that Sarah and I were engaged. Sarah, who had been my rock for the past 3 years. We met at a tech conference, both reaching for the last slice of pepperoni pizza. It was silly, but we clicked instantly. "Everything looks lovely, Alex," Sarah said, stepping into the dining room. She was wearing her green dress, the one that made her eyes shine. I remember thinking how lucky I was. "I hope they'll love the news as much as I do," I said, giving her a quick peck on the cheek. We had planned every detail, down to when we'd break the news during dessert. The anticipation was killing me, but in a good way. Dinner started off wonderfully. Mom had outdone herself with the meal, and Dad was in high spirits, cracking jokes about the neighbors. We laughed, shared stories, and it felt like the perfect moment was building, naturally leading to dessert. As we reached that point, my heart pounded. I took a deep breath and held up the ring, its sparkle catching the light. "Mom, Dad, I wanted to share something special tonight. Sarah and I are engaged." The room went silent. The smile on my mother's face faded, and my father's expression darkened like a storm cloud rolling in. "How dare you decide to marry outside our culture, Alex?" My dad's voice was cold, each word soaked with disbelief and anger. My mom covered her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes. "You're bringing shame to our family," she whispered, more to herself than to me. I was stunned, my words stuck in my throat. This wasn't how I imagined the night would go. "Dad, I love her. She makes me happy. Isn't that what matters?" I pleaded. "You should know better," he shot back, standing so quickly that his chair toppled over. "Get out, and don't come back with such disrespect." Sarah, who had been silent, reached for my hand under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze. I knew what I had to do. Standing up, I faced my parents, my voice steady. "I'm sorry you feel this way. I hoped for your blessing, but with or without it, I'm marrying Sarah." We left the house that night, the door slamming shut behind us, echoing the finality of the evening. As we drove away, the ring still in my hand, Sarah turned to me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, but her voice firm. "We'll get through this together." And as we headed into the uncertainty of our future, I knew she was right. We were together, and that was what mattered. We were about to start a new chapter, just the two of us against the world. The weeks following my parents' rejection were a blur of emotions and difficult conversations. Sarah and I spent a lot of time at my new apartment, a small but cozy place that became our refuge from the storm. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, my phone buzzed nonstop. It was my Aunt Maria. I hesitated but answered, hoping for some words of comfort. "Alex, dear, what have you done?" "Your mother is devastated." Her voice was a mix of concern and disappointment. "I love Sarah. Aunt Maria. I thought they'd be happy for me. You know our traditions, Alex. Marrying outside the culture. It's hard for them." "I know, but it's my life." The call ended with promises to keep in touch, but the lack of outright support stung. The next day, Sarah and I met with some more closest friends at a local cafe. Jenna, always the outspoken one, slammed her coffee down a bit too hard. "They're your parents, Alex, but they're wrong. You and Sarah are perfect together." Tom, ever the mediator, chimed in, "Maybe give it some time. They might come around." Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, a silent pillar of strength, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. She was always feeling like the outsider, the reason for my estrangement. One weekend, we attended a family gathering on Sarah's side. Her family was warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to my own. Her uncle clapped me on the back and said, "Your family now, Alex. Don't mind the naysayers." Yet despite their support, Sarah felt guilty, as if she were to blame for the rift. That night, back at our place, she broke down. "Maybe if I were different, your parents would have accepted me. It's not you, Sarah. It's their old world mindset. We can't let that dictate our happiness. But even as I comforted her, doubts crept into my mind. Was I being selfish? Was my happiness worth this division? The conflict between my love for Sarah and my loyalty to my family tore at me. One afternoon, I sat in the park, watching families go about their day. Laughter echoed from the playground, but I couldn't shake my solemn mood. An old man, noticing my expression, sat down next to me. "Trouble with the heart of the home?" he asked. "Both, I guess," I admitted and ended up sharing my story. He listened quietly, nodding as I spoke. "Son," he said thoughtfully, "home isn't just where you come from. It's where you make it with those who love you, traditions and all." His words lingered in my mind as I made my way back to Sarah. That evening, as we sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights, I took her hands and said, "We'll build our home, Sarah, with or without them. Our love, our rules." In that moment, I knew that no matter the opposition, we would forge our path together, building a future where love transcends tradition. Sarah and I found solace in planning our wedding. We poured our energy into picking venues, tasting cakes, and choosing invitations that told our story, a blend of our cultures, symbolizing unity, love, and diversity. One afternoon, we found ourselves in our counselor's office, a cozy, book-lined room that felt like a safe harbor. Dr. Bennett, our counselor, was a patient listener, helping us navigate the emotional turmoil we faced. "As you build this new chapter," Dr. Bennett said gently, "it's not just about moving past the pain, but understanding and growing from it." His voice was calm, reassuring. Sarah nodded, squeezing my hand. "It's hard. I feel like I'm the reason Alex is estranged from his family." "That's not true, Sarah," I quickly responded. "It's about them not accepting my choice, not about you." Dr. Bennett smiled slightly. "It's important to remember this isn't about blame. It's about creating a space where both of you feel accepted and loved, no matter the external pressures." The next few weeks were filled with wedding preparations. Each detail we planned together felt like a step toward healing. But in the back of my mind, the thought of reconciling with my parents weighed on me. Could I truly move on without trying one last time? That question hit hard when, one evening, my brother Michael unexpectedly showed up at our apartment. "Mom's sick, Alex. She's been asking for you," he said, his voice tense. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. My first instinct was to rush to her side, but then I remembered their harsh words, their rejection. Sarah, ever perceptive, touched my arm. Maybe this is a chance to mend things, or at least find some closure. With her encouragement, I decided to visit my mom. As I stood outside her hospital room, I hesitated, unsure of what awaited me. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. She looked frail, a shadow of the strong woman I remembered. When she saw me, there was a flicker of surprise, followed by relief. "Alex," she whispered, her voice weak. "Mom, I'm here," I said, simple words loaded with unspoken emotions. We talked, really talked, for the first time in months. She shared her fears and regrets, not fully accepting my choices, but the love between us was undeniable. It wasn't complete reconciliation, but it was a start, a small step toward understanding. Leaving the hospital, I felt a mix of sadness and hope. Back at home, Sarah and I discussed the visit. Whatever the future held, one thing was clear. We were in this together, no matter what came next. She affirmed as we resumed our wedding plans, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We weren't just planning a celebration. We were laying a foundation of our future, brick by brick, built on respect, love, and the courage to embrace our true selves despite the adversity. Our wedding day arrived, small and intimate, held in a quaint garden Sarah had fallen in love with during our venue search. The setting was simple yet beautiful, with flowers blooming all around us. mirroring the new life we were about to start together. Only a few close friends and supportive family members were present, each one a testament to the love and strength that carried us through our toughest times. As Sarah walked down the aisle, radiant in a flowing white dress, there wasn't a dry eye to be seen. The air was thick with emotion. Each step she took symbolized our journey, challenging, yet filled with unwavering love and commitment. When she reached me, her hand in mine felt like the final piece of a puzzle, perfectly fitting, meant to be. Standing before our loved ones, I took a deep breath, ready to make not just a vow to Sarah, but a declaration for our future. Today, I not only take you, Sarah, as my wife, but I also vow to build a life with you that celebrates our strengths, respects our differences, and defies the odds we faced. Together, we will create a world where love is the only culture that defines us. The ceremony continued with heartfelt vows, gentle laughter, and the kind of warmth that only true acceptance brings. As we exchanged rings, the simplicity of the moment underscored the profound nature of our bond, one that had been forged in the fires of adversity, but was stronger for it. After the ceremony, as we mingled with our guests, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my father. My heart stopped for a moment, unsure of what to expect. With a reassuring nod from Sarah, I read it. *, congratulations, Alex. Your mother and I wish you happiness, *. It was brief, and while it didn't erase the pain of the past, it was a gesture, a small olive branch that hinted at the possibility of healing. Sarah squeezed my hand, her smile telling me everything I needed to know. We're doing this together, no matter what comes our way, she whispered. Later, as we stood looking out at our guests, basking in the joy of the day, we both knew this was just the beginning. Our future stretched out before us, promising not just challenges, but the potential for incredible joy and fulfillment. We were ready to face whatever life threw our way, knowing that at the end of the day, we had each other, and that was more than enough. As we walked back through the garden, the setting sun cast a golden glow around us, the light of 1,000 possibilities shining on the path ahead. Together, we stepped into our new life, not just as husband and wife, but as partners in a journey of acceptance, understanding, and profound love. That's the end of our story, folks. Now, I have a question for you. Do you think cultural traditions should hold more weight than personal happiness in matters of love and marriage? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hi, I'm Jordan. Growing up in a family with more zeros in their bank account than you'd see at a blockbuster premiere, you'd think my life was all private jets and champagne. Not quite. While my siblings, Ella and Nate, got trust funds and luxury cars before they could even drive, I got the family mantra. Work harder, Jordan. Achieve on your own merit, my dad would say, his voice echoing through the mansion like it was some motivational seminar. My mom, always dressed head to toe in designer, would nod, her diamond earrings glinting as she added, "It builds character, dear." But one crisp fall evening, everything changed. I overheard a conversation behind the gilded doors of my father's study. Words like debt and bankruptcy floated out like ghosts. My mom's voice, usually calm and composed, trembled. "What are we going to do?" "We'll figure it out," Dad replied, his tone grave. "But don't tell the kids, especially not Jordan." Ella and Nate were shielded, cushioned by their trust funds. Me? I was on my own. Fueled by betrayal and determination, I decided to dig deeper. If my parents thought they could hide this colossal mess while pretending everything was perfect, they were dead wrong. It was time to expose the lie. The next day, I went to the bank, acting like I was just there for a routine checkup on my non-existent trust fund. The manager, Mr. Thompson, had always had a soft spot for the family. But this time, I needed more than pleasantries. "Hey, Mr. Thompson, how's the family? Kids must be in college by now. Huh?" I kept it light, sliding my real questions between small talk. Actually, I was wondering if there's been any unusual activity with the family accounts. Just, with the market being what it is. Mr. Thompson leaned in, lowering his voice. Well, Jordan, I shouldn't say this, but there have been some substantial withdrawals and loans taken against your parents' accounts. Times are tough all around. Bingo. That was the first crack in their carefully constructed facade. Later, I overheard a heated phone call between my mom and someone who was definitely not a friend. We need to consolidate everything. If this gets out before we're ready, it'll ruin us, she said, her usual grace shattered by panic. At dinner that night, the charade continued. Ella was bragging about some extravagant purchase. Nate was planning yet another overseas trip. Must be nice, I muttered under my breath. What was that, Jordan? Ella glanced up, fork halfway to her mouth. Oh, nothing, I replied with a forced smile. Just glad to see everyone's doing so well. Wish we could all share in that stability. My parents exchanged quick glances. Jordan, we're proud of how independent you are, Dad said, his voice firm but hollow. Yeah, independence is great, I shot back. But a little support wouldn't hurt. I kept my cards close for now, but the game had already begun, and I wasn't playing to lose. The family reunion was the perfect setting for my revelation. The room was full of laughter, clinking glasses, and superficial cheer. During the toast, I seized my moment. To family, I began, my voice steady. To the ties that bind us, and the truths that define us. Everyone cheered, raising their glasses, but I wasn't finished. And to the hard truths, like the fact that while some of us have been given every advantage, the rest of us are standing on a sinking ship. Silence. My mom's face went pale. Jordan, what are you talking about? She asked, her voice shaky. I'm talking about the debt, Mom. The debt you and Dad have been hiding. The one threatening everything you've built, while you cushion Ella and Nate. Gasps filled the room. Ella and Nate looked from me to our parents, their confusion morphing into panic. Dad stood, his voice booming. Jordan, you're out of line. This isn't the time or place. But it's true, isn't it? I pressed, pulling out documents from my jacket. Here, bank statements. You've been borrowing against your assets, racking up debt to maintain an illusion. Ella snatched the papers from my hand, her eyes darting over the numbers. This can't be right. Our trust funds, are they compromised? Yes, I confirmed, locking eyes with her. Nate, yours too. All to keep up appearances. Nate stood, anger flashing across his face. You knew about this? And just watched us spend? What kind of brother does that make you? The kind that wants to wake you up. I shot back. We're all in this mess together because of decisions they made, I said, gesturing toward our parents. Not me. The confrontation spiraled as accusations flew. Mom and Dad scrambled to calm the storm, insisting on private discussions. But the damage was done. Trust, the foundation of our family, was now as hollow as the bank accounts they'd drained. As the evening descended into chaos, with siblings and parents at odds, I stepped back. The truth was out, the fantasy shattered, and the real family reunion had just begun. In the days that followed, the cold silence from my family was deafening. I was now the pariah, the whistleblower who dared to pull a mask off the facade we'd lived under for so long. I left the house and started fresh, leaning on a few supportive friends. One day, I got a text from Ella, the first contact since the fallout. You've destroyed this family. Don't expect any of us to forgive you for this. I stared at the message, the weight of my choices sinking in. After a moment, I replied, not expecting a breakthrough. I revealed the truth for all of us, Ella. Someday, I hope you'll see that. No response. With my family ties frayed, I focused on the one thing I still had control over, my own future. I poured my energy into building something genuine, something not built on deceit. That's when I launched my financial advisory blog. Managing money isn't just about having it. It's about making wise choices, I wrote in my first post. The response was overwhelming. People were hungry for honest advice, something I wished I'd had from my own family. As my blog gained traction, readers started reaching out. "Thanks, Jordan," one message read. "Your advice on debt management helped me get back on my feet. How did you learn so much about this?" I replied, sharing bits of my story without revealing too much. "Life taught me the hard way. Glad I could help." Another message from a woman named Melissa read, "Your posts about financial independence are inspiring. It's tough going it alone, isn't it?" "It is, Melissa," I wrote back, "but it's worth it. Building something that's truly yours can never be taken away." Strangers I'd never met felt closer to me than my own family, and as the months went on, my blog became more than just a website. It became a community. People from all walks of life shared their financial struggles and triumphs, a stark contrast to the hollow success my family had paraded around for years. One evening, I hosted a webinar called Truth and Finances. Hundreds of people logged in to hear me speak. "You have to face the hard truths," I told them. "Just like in life, you can't ignore the debt hiding under the rug. It's better to face it head-on, restructure, and move forward." The applause from the virtual crowd was real, genuine validation and respect, the kind of recognition money could never buy. Despite the strain with my family, my efforts and honesty had paid off. Living apart from their wealth and influence, I hadn't just survived, I had thrived. As I closed my laptop that night, the loneliness felt a little less biting. The path I had chosen was mine alone, but it was paved with genuine connections and real achievements. What once felt like isolation had transformed into independence, a price I was willing to pay for a life of integrity. Months later, the news broke like a tidal wave across financial headlines. Prominent business family faces bankruptcy, assets seized. My parents, once pillars of the community, had become symbols of mismanagement and hidden debts. The fallout wasn't just theirs to bear. Ella and Nate's trust funds evaporated like morning mist. I read the articles over my morning coffee, the bitter taste mingling with a complex mix of vindication and sorrow. My phone buzzed incessantly. Notifications from blog readers flooded in. A comment from Jenna caught my eye. "Jordan, saw the news about your family. How are you holding up?" I typed my response. "Thanks for the concern, Jenna. It's tough, but it reinforces everything I advocate for: transparency, responsibility, and stability in finances." As my blog grew, so did my reputation as a voice of reason amidst the chaos of financial crisis. Invitations to speak at conferences and guest on financial podcasts became the new norm. My message was simple: integrity over affluence. During one live podcast, the host asked, "Jordan, how do you maintain trust with your audience in light of your family's issues?" "I believe in being upfront," I replied. "My family's downfall due to hidden debts only strengthens my resolve to promote financial honesty and resilience." The community's support was overwhelming, propelling my blog to new heights. It became a trusted resource for people navigating their own financial turmoil. One evening, as I wrapped up another successful webinar, a message popped up from Nate, the last person I expected to hear from. "Hey Jordan, can we talk?" Curious and cautious, I called him. "Nate, what's up?" There was a pause, then a heavy breath. "I owe you an apology, Jordan. You were right about everything. I was too caught up in the benefits to see the costs. I'm sorry for how things went down at the reunion." Hearing Nate admit his mistakes was a closure I hadn't expected. "Thanks, Nate. It means a lot to hear you say that. It's been tough for all of us." "Yeah, it has. Maybe you can help me start fixing my finances. I've got a lot to learn, and you seem to have figured some things out. I'd be glad to help, Nate. Let's get you on a path to recovery, one step at a time, I said, a smile breaking through the old resentments. As we ended the call, a sense of peace settled over me. While my family ties might never be what they once were, this small step with Nate hinted at a future where forgiveness wasn't just possible, but a foundation for rebuilding. Through the trials and the success of my blog, I realized that while I had distanced myself from my family's wealth, I had crafted something far more valuable: a legacy of resilience and ethical behavior. As I closed my laptop that night, preparing for another day of writing and advising, I knew that success wasn't just about what you accumulate, but what you stand for. That's the end of Jordan's journey with family, truth, and financial independence. But now, let's dive deeper. Do you think revealing family secrets for the greater good is justifiable? Or should family loyalty come first, no matter the cost? Share your thoughts in the comments below.